Thanks for
And
talking.
we're back with the developers of Dyadic Unity. Sorry, I can't talk tonight. Sarah Love and Daniel Ribaudo. Um, this is their MQP, and I'll get out of the way.
Well, let's ask the questions. First of all, hello, how y'all doing today? That's question number one. It's a softball.
Pretty good. How are
It's the
you?
last Friday of the term.
Yes,
Woo-hoo.
term's great. It's over. You're graduating. Tell us about Dyadic Unity.
Sure. Dyadic Unity is a 2D RPG side scroller game where you interact with NPCs and solve puzzles. That's basically the rundown.
Well, tell us about the interesting core mechanic to it.
Okay, so there's a couple of things to unpack there. First of all, the game was conceived as more of a social sim. So within the world, there are actually two different worlds that you can change between at a button press, and both of them are like reflections of one another. Doing things in one world affects the other world and vice versa. This serves as the basis for both the social interactions and the puzzles, and the two are intertwined. The core gameplay loop is focused around manipulating physical objects in the world in order to prompt various responses from the NPCs and then talk to them more and follow up about it, which will then directly alter other physical properties in the world, allowing you to get back to the physical stuff, on and on and on.
And what's really unique that I haven't heard you talk about yet in it is this emphasis on tone, conversational tone, and its connection to feeling in the real world. What's that about? What were you? Uh, it's a delicious ingredient. What brought that on, and what did you do with it?
I mean, like how NPCs interact, well, how the player interacts with NPCs and how it affects the world. Yeah, so the original thought was to examine kind of like morality. There's some stuff that we didn't weren't able to include in the game. The idea was to eventually merge the two halves of the world so that you would get something that was neutral and in between, because not all things are good and not all things are bad that you would ordinarily think. So that was where the original thinking for that concept came from.
So, can
Although
you give
not
me?
all of the original concept made it into the final game.
Oh my gosh, that's game development in a nutshell, right? You get to cut,
Yeah.
cut, cut. So for the folks who haven't played the game in the audience, can you give an example of one of the interactions?
Of course. So there's one NPC in the game called the Custodian, and she really wants to clean up the garden, but she's been unable to because on the opposite side, there's an NPC called the Host who wants to party all the time, and his partying causes the objects on on the Custodian side to break. So you have to choose to help one of them in order to solve the puzzle.
Um, was it seems like an interesting. It's a bit of a writing challenge there, right? You're drawing from humanity and putting in there what were there people or experiences that you were replicating in your game? What stories did you want to tell through these emotions in your game?
So I can speak a little about that on a general sense. So at least for me, there wasn't a specific person that inspired any of the ideas for NPCs. It was more just very raw thoughts, feelings. The emphasis on the host and the custodian pairing is more of a self-image and how that affects people. Um, so we kind of explored both of the extreme ends of that, being a very big people pleaser and being a very big, like feeling judged by other people, and kind of how both of those kind of go astray. So it was really kind of hitting upon lessons or themes or raw emotions that like were going to go bad if you took them to the extreme in both ways.
So, Sarah, you mentioned, as with all game development or most game development, every game I've been part of, you some stuff had to end up on the cutting floor. Can you talk a little bit about give me an example, give us an example of one thing, and how did you decide what to keep and what to leave?
So I guess I can preface with originally we had planned for 7 different puzzles. we have 2 in the game. We decided to go with the puzzles that we thought were, well, we started development on the puzzles that we thought were the most possible to make and the fastest to make, and that had the most translatable mechanics to the other puzzles so that we could use them as like groundwork for the others. So we ended up just going with those 2 starter puzzles instead of continuing on to the other 5. That's how we kind of decided where to draw the line on how many puzzles there were going to be in the game.
So cutting scope, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And I mean, after thinking this game, you had to make it. Technically, what was that experience like? Were you fighting with the tools? Were you happy with what you got? I mean, clearly you couldn't just magically make everything happen, but how was your technical experience making this?
So technically, at least from the programmer end, it seemed pretty fine, pretty straightforward. We did some interesting stuff with the programming. I'm sure we'll get to that in a later question. But overall, I at least had a lot of experience in the Unity engine, what we made this in. So there's no problem just kind of transitioning into the next project, setting up the Unity Teams ordeal, pressing that big old collab button at the top to push changes. And it worked really well coming together. I think Sarah can speak more about the art.
There are actually very little problems with the actual development of the game. I think more of their problems came with actually like expressing what the purpose of the game was to the player. That was our real challenge during like development. There were no like real bumps in the road like, oh, this doesn't work with this or this doesn't work with that. It was mostly just making sure that it was an understandable experience and how like we communicated our story to the player was like it made sense, and if that makes sense.
Yeah, and going off of that, I would say that just to kind of reframe that, it was more we were very ambitious and made some stuff and kind of overextended ourselves, and then when it came to playtesting, we got a lot of feedback of what am I doing? So then that kind of prompted us to go back and really tailor the content that we had made to being more amenable to player experience.
I think you could cut and paste that statement to a whole lot of projects. We we were over ambitious. We extended ourselves. Then we had some playtesting.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great way to do it, right? Because you could extend development time out, and you could graduate in 2 years, or you could never listen to feedback, and maybe you'd get something a little less amazing. All right, so we just got a 2-minute warning. Y'all, at least some of you are graduating. What's next? What do you want to do next?
Well, I know that I want to be like a media production specialist for like motion graphics and stuff. I would love to go on to do that.
Yep, as for me, I'm going for my master's degree next year right here at WPI, BSMS program. Kind of locked down for the most part an internship over the summer, mostly a computer science deal, but yeah.
Awesome. I don't know if we have any time. What part of this is going to stick with you? This project, is that part of what are you going to take away from this project in your hearts?
Personally, for me, this was like a big passion project. I'd always wanted to develop. Well, not always, but since sophomore year, I wanted to develop this game. So it feels good to finally have at least some of it out.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, as for me, I think that because there's a bit of procedural generation with the puzzles, with one of the ones that I made, it sparked a lot of interest in that sort of field for me, and I think I'm gonna continue looking into it moving forwards. And it was a nice experience to like look into more computer science things related to game development.
Excellent. So thanks everybody. Not only Sarah and Daniel, but Ichiro and Ziba, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for...
You're not going to get rid of us yet, Dean. Well, we're on for the long haul. Next game is us too.
Is it?
It totally is.
Okay.
Or we're taking over.
I didn't put pants on today for one game.
Okay.
I didn't even put pants on.
The people who are responsible for my information have been sacked.
Isn't that you?
Unless we got sacked.
Yeah, that's pretty much me. I'm sacking myself. So we're gonna take a brief intermission while we shuffle people in and out, and we'll be right back.